A 9-0 Supreme Court message gun owners cannot ignore. While public attention stayed focused on politics, culture battles, and daily headlines, the Supreme Court quietly delivered one of the most consequential firearm-related rulings in modern history. There were no press conferences and no dramatic announcements. Yet in a unanimous 9-0 decision, the court issued language that legal scholars now say could reshape the future of state-level assault weapon bans nationwide. The ruling never used the phrase gun control, but its implications are already echoing through courtrooms across the country. This decision affects states with the strictest firearm laws and challenges long-standing narratives used to justify bans. From California to New York, Illinois to Connecticut, the legal ground has shifted. And while many media outlets have avoided discussing the consequences, the courts are already responding. Please subscribe to our channel where we focus on what the law actually says and why it matters. Chapter 1. Lawsuit that reached the Supreme Court. The case that triggered this historic ruling did not begin as a Second Amendment challenge. Instead, it started with an unprecedented lawsuit filed by the Mexican government against major American firearm manufacturers. Mexico alleged that companies such as Smith & Wesson, Glock, Colt, and Ruger were indirectly responsible for cartel violence by allowing firearms to be trafficked across the border. The claim was not that the companies broke the law, but that they should still be held financially responsible for crimes committed by third parties. Mexico sought billions of dollars in damages from American manufacturers. The lawsuit attempted to bypass existing federal protections for lawful firearm sales. No direct illegal conduct by the manufacturers was alleged. The theory relied on holding businesses responsible for downstream criminal misuse. Lower courts dismissed the case under federal law, but Mexico continued to appeal. Eventually, the case reached the United States Supreme Court under the name Smith & Wesson Brands Incorporated versus Estados Unidos Mexicanos. What followed was a rare moment of complete agreement among the justices. Chapter 2. The sentence with national consequences. In June 2025, the Supreme Court issued a unanimous 9-0 decision rejecting Mexico's lawsuit. The ruling centered on the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, a federal statute that shields firearm manufacturers from liability when their products are lawfully sold and later misused. However, buried within the opinion was a single sentence that extended far beyond the immediate case. That sentence would soon become central to firearm litigation nationwide. The opinion was authored by Justice Elena Kagan. The court stated that firearms like the AR-15 are widely legal and commonly owned by law-abiding citizens. This statement was endorsed by all 9 justices. It was included as a factual and legal finding, not casual commentary. This language matters because it directly addresses the legal status of the firearm most frequently targeted by assault weapon bans. By affirming that AR-style rifles are both lawful and commonly owned, the court established a critical point that lower courts cannot ignore. The significance of that sentence reaches far beyond the case itself. Chapter 3. Common Use and Constitutional Protection. To understand why this sentence is so powerful, it must be viewed through the lens of existing Supreme Court precedent. In District of Columbia versus Heller and later in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruen, the court established a clear constitutional test. Firearms that are in common use for lawful purposes responsible citizens are protected by the Second Amendment. States cannot ban such arms simply because they are politically unpopular. The common use standard is central to modern Second Amendment analysis. Millions of Americans lawfully own AR-style rifles. These firearms are used for home defense, training, competition, and recreation. Widespread lawful ownership removes them from the dangerous and unusual category. By explicitly recognizing AR-15-style rifles as commonly owned, the Supreme Court effectively reinforced their constitutional protection. This places state-level bans on unstable legal ground. Courts reviewing these laws must now reconcile them with the Supreme Court's own language. Chapter 4. Courts are already applying the ruling. The impact of the Supreme Court's decision has not been theoretical. Lower courts are already citing and relying on its language. Nowhere is this more visible than in challenges to California's assault weapon laws. Judges reviewing these cases are being forced to confront the court's clear statement on common ownership. Federal judges have struck down state bans using common use analysis. Attorneys are citing the Supreme Court's language directly. States are struggling to justify bans under Bruen standards. Long-standing restrictions are being reopened to challenge. What was once an uphill battle for gun rights plaintiffs has shifted. The Supreme Court did not need to issue a direct ruling on assault weapon bans to weaken them. By clarifying what qualifies as protected arms, it altered the legal landscape. Chapter 5. Resistance from the bench and the states. As these legal challenges move forward, resistance has intensified. Some judges and state officials appear unwilling to accept the implications of the Supreme Court's ruling. In certain hearings, confusion and mischaracterization of basic firearm facts have become part of the record. This has raised serious concerns about judicial understanding and consistency. Some judges have misidentified semi-automatic rifles as machine guns. Others have suggested that constitutional rights vary by state. These arguments conflict with established constitutional principles. The reactions signal strain within the legal system. These responses reflect more than disagreement. They reveal pressure on courts tasked with defending laws that may no longer survive constitutional scrutiny. As the Supreme Court's language continues to filter downward, resistance may delay outcomes but cannot erase precedent. Chapter 6. A national issue, not a state problem. Although many people associate assault weapon bans with California, this issue extends far beyond one state. As of early 2026, multiple states and the District of Columbia enforce restrictions on commonly owned rifles using nearly identical legal language. These laws focus less on function and more on cosmetic features such as grips, stocks, and muzzle devices. Despite their breadth, compliance data tells a very different story about how these laws function in reality. Multiple states restrict rifles based on features rather than lethality or misuse. Illinois enacted a sweeping ban affecting millions of lawful owners. New York compliance rates remain extremely low years after enactment. Connecticut registration figures show widespread non-compliance. What these numbers reveal is not mass criminality, but a fundamental disconnect between legislation and reality. When laws target firearms owned by millions of ordinary citizens, enforcement becomes impractical and constitutionally suspect. Courts are increasingly forced to confront this reality. Widespread lawful ownership undermines the claim that these firearms are unusual or outside constitutional protection. Chapter 7. What comes next in the courts? The Supreme Court's unanimous ruling has already begun reshaping litigation strategy nationwide. Legal challenges that were once stalled or dismissed are now being reopened with renewed force. Attorneys are no longer arguing theory alone. They are citing direct language from the Supreme Court itself. Lawsuits are advancing in states with existing rifle bans. Courts now have explicit guidance on common use analysis. Second Amendment organizations are coordinating a nationwide strategy. Lower courts are under increasing pressure to align with Supreme Court precedent. This ruling did not merely protect firearm manufacturers from liability, it clarified how commonly owned rifles must be treated under constitutional law. States can no longer rely on abstract claims or emotional arguments alone. They must now justify bans against clear Supreme Court language, recognizing lawful and widespread ownership. Why this moment matters. This decision represents more than a single case or a narrow legal victory. It reflects a broader correction in how the Second Amendment is interpreted and applied. For years, states have pushed boundaries through incremental restrictions. That approach is now facing serious constitutional resistance. The Supreme Court did not issue a sweeping proclamation. Instead, it stated a simple legal truth with far-reaching consequences. Firearms that are lawful and commonly owned fall within the protection of the Constitution. That principle now stands clearly on the record. If you value clear legal analysis without noise or exaggeration, subscribe to our channel. We track these cases as they develop and explain what actually changes and what does not. This legal fight is ongoing, and future rulings will continue to shape the boundaries of firearm law. When the next decision arrives, we will be here to break it down carefully and accurately.